we have a super rare double dedication for this edition of the Parsha Podcast. This Parsha Podcast is dedicated in honor of a young birthday boy, Binyamin Shlomo Sandowski, the son of our dear friends Alon and Natalie, and he's turning 1 this week. Happy birthday, young man! May young Binyamin Shlomo live to 120 and grow and flourish and blossom and flower into a special person and a special Jew who brings joy to his parents, to his community, and to his Creator. This Parsha Podcast is also dedicated by my friend Steve Horak in honor of his wife Elena Silberman's 55th birthday. Happy birthday from the entire Parsha Podcast family. May you have many happy returns and a wonderful year of only joy and only blessing and only goodness. I was thinking to do like a quadruple dedication because today happens to also be the Hebrew calendar birthday of my son Yitzchak Aaron, and also of my son Israel Meir, but they don't listen to the podcast. You know, I tell you this all the time. My kids agree on only one thing. They don't want to listen to the podcast. So why would I put an extra dedication for them? But the truth is, a couple of nights ago, my son Shlomo came to me. He's like, I need to listen to something. Tell me to fall asleep. I said, you go to your room and I'll put something on the speaker. I'll play something surprising for you. And I put on one of my Jewish history podcasts. And I put it on like a 15-minute timer. I said, maybe this will work. After 50 minutes, it was like the sleep timer. I got a knock. Abba, could you just put it on for 10 more minutes? Victory! We got him. We persuaded him to listen and enjoy to the Jewish History Podcast. And then last night he came back for another Jewish History Podcast. So maybe the tide is turning. Maybe we can finally get some of the Wolby boys and girls, some of the Wolby children to listen and enjoy to the podcast. Maybe we're not quite celebrating yet. And we're not celebrating either the completion of the Torch annual fundraiser. Just a quick update as we are recording this on Tuesday evening. This is the Parsha Podcast live on torchzoom.com each Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Central. We have 434 donors. Thank you all for your wonderful generosity. And we are 64% of the way towards our goal. Please God, we'll reach the goal. We've done this fundraiser now. I think the first year was 2015. So that means that this is the 11th year. And every single year, I was convinced at some point along over the course of the fundraiser, we're not going to reach our goal. But so far, we're 10 for 10. So please God, we'll reach our goal this year as well. If you want to support the Torch fundraiser, the website is givetorch.org. I will put the link in the description of this Parsha Podcast so you can have easy access to see where we're holding and give us a little boost. You know, given that this is fundraiser week here at Torch, I thought, you know what? It's a Parsha Podcast. I've done some good Parsha Podcasts and Parsha TCs in the past. Maybe I'll just mail this one in. And I thought of ways. I looked at my notes that I could probably mail this in. There was all sorts of interesting angles and fascinating questions without giving answers. I could have done that, but the Almighty bailed me out yet again. I think it's a good one. You let me know. Send me an email, rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. It's Parshas Sisa. And the Parsha starts off without any indication that it contains the most shocking event, certainly in the Torah, and maybe in all of human history. We've had Parshas Truma, Parshas Tetzaveh, Tabernacle, and it starts off with more tabernacle-related matters. It starts off with the annual tabernacle fundraiser, the half shekel. Everyone gives a half shekel, and that doubles also as a census. You count the coins, and by dint of that, you know how many people. Don't count people, because then everyone will die in a plague. You have to use a proxy. In the United States, there's a census every decade. In the temple, in the tabernacle, there's a census once a year that coincides as a fundraiser. And this money, these funds will be used to purchase public sacrifices. And that will provide atonement for the whole nation. And if you want to give more, you can't. Everyone must give the same. Everyone, poor and rich alike, give a half shekel. And of course, I have to contractually tell you that the Torch fundraiser is happening right now as well. GiveTorch.org. That's the first part of the Parsha. And then we read about the kiyar, the laver, which is the special spigots that contain the water that the priests would wash their hands and feet before doing any service in the temple. And then we read about the anointing oil, special oil that you're not allowed to replicate. And it was made only once, one flask of oil made by Moshe. And miraculously, this oil would replenish and would be used initially to anoint the vessels of the tabernacle, the actual body of the tabernacle, the garments of the priests themselves. When kings were anointed or were inaugurated, were coronated, they were anointed with the same flask of oil. The Midrash tells us that this same flask of oil is extant somewhere. And please God, when Messiah comes, we will rediscover the anointing oil, and Messiah will indeed be anointed with that same oil. In fact, the word Messiah means anointed. This is the coronation event or practice that makes a king a king. And then we read about the Ketoras. The Ketoras was a twice daily offering brought in the temple. It was done on the inner golden altar. At the end of last week's parsha, we read about the inner golden altar, not the outer copper altar. And on the inner golden altar, it was not an altar for sacrifices or for blood services. It was only for ketores, the incense, which is a cocktail of 11 spices and herbs, including the rancid, foul-smelling, effluvious chelbana. And these are mixed together in the right proportions, and they are burned on the inner altar every day. And when these 11 spices are mixed together, each one on their own has a distinct smell. And some of them even have a terrible smell like the aforementioned chelbana, but when they're mixed together perfectly, it's actually a wondrous, delightful, delectable aroma. Now I want to start off with a classic Parsha Podcast observation. When is the Ketoras, the incense, burned atop the inner golden altar? When is it burned? So at the very end of last week's Parsha, chapter 30, verses 7 and 8, we find the 2 times a day that the Ketoras, the incense, is burned. The verse tells us that Aaron burns the Ketoras, the incense, every morning when he prepares the candles, the lamps of the Menorah. So the verse connects. When in the morning does Aaron burn the Ketoras? When he prepares the lamps for that night's lighting of the Menorah. So there's a linkage between the Menorah, the preparation of that day's Menorah, which will be done at night, but the preparation is done in the morning. And when the Menorah is prepared, that's when the Ketoras is burnt, or at least the first tranche, the first daily batch is burned. And the very next verse, verse 8, Ubehalos Aaron haneros, and when Aaron actually kindles the Menorah in the afternoon towards the evening, well, that's when the second bit of Ketoras is burnt. So Ketoras, you have 2 batches a day, once in the morning, when Aaron prepares, when the high priest prepares the Menorah, and once towards the evening, when the Menorah is actually lit. So the obvious question is, why are these 2 practices in the temple, the kindling of the Menorah and the burning of the incense, why are these linked together? Whenever Aaron does something with the Menorah, he prepares the Menorah, he lights the Menorah, at both instances, every stage is matched with a burning of the Ketoras. Why? That's a question, not necessarily a classic Parsha Podcast question, but here's the classic observation. When you light the Menorah, when the Kohen lights the Menorah, the verse tells us that he has to use very special oil. It can't just use ordinary oil. It's got to be olive oil, virgin olive oil. It's got to be clear of any sediments. It's got to be pure. You have to remove all the sediments. So the oil, it must be pristine. It can't have any flecks of sediment. You have to get rid of all the waste, all the contaminants, all the alloys, all the less less desirable elements. They must all be removed when you light the menorah. By contrast, if you look at the incense, at the Torah, that is connected with the menorah. What is it? It's 11 different ingredients. Some of them are delightful, and some of them smell positively awful. It's like sediments. It's stuff you don't want. But you have to include the sediments. You must include the bad things, the less desirable parts. Otherwise, the Torah is invalid. So we see maybe two different systems. The system of the olive oil used for the menorah. You start off with a mixture, and you have to separate the mixture to keep only the purest of pure olive oil, and to remove any bit of sediments. Even though if there was a little bit of sediments, it would still light, it would still work, it would still be a good flicker, but still, it's got to be pure. By contrast, the whole preparation of the cocktail, of the incense, of the ktores, it's taking a whole bunch of different things, some good, some bad, some positively awful, and mixing it all up together and not removing any of the contaminants. That's a totally different system. And the interesting thing is that they're done together. So that's the observation. We'll get to that in a little bit. Just hold that thought in your head. We'll get back to it. Next, Bezalel is appointed to oversee the construction of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, together with a talented team of helpers. And then we have the final verse of chapter 31. It was when Moshe finished speaking with God at Mount Sinai. This is, recall Moshe had been up in heaven, and he had been there to get the tablets and really the law, all the details of the Ten Commandments, which is just the abstract, it's just the framework of Torah. At the end of 40 days, Moshe receives the tablets of stone, the tablets of testimony that are written, that are etched, that are inscribed with the finger of God. Now, if you stopped here and I asked you, well, how does the story end? You would never have guessed what happens next. The next verse, chapter 32, there's chaos. We go back to the nation. What's happening with them? Moshe, he finishes his 40-day stint. What's the nation been doing in the interim? The verse tells us that the nation saw that Moshe was delaying. He was tarrying in descending. And they congregate against Aaron. And they tell Aaron, make for us gods that will go before us. Because this man, Moshe, the Moshe that we last saw 40 days ago, he took us out of Egypt, but we don't know what happened to him. And of course, we know the Midrash, Rashi cites the Midrash, the Satan came and made it confusing and made it appear that Moshe was dead and projected an image of the coffin of Moshe being taken away. They're freaking out. Make us a replacement. Make us gods. And then Aaron says, okay, well, take off the earrings and the nose rings of your sons, your daughters, bring it to me, and somehow they come with all the gold. And he takes it, and somehow we have a golden calf. And the people begin to celebrate with the golden calf. This is your God, O Israel, who took you out of the land of Egypt. And Aaron saw, and he built an altar, and he says, well, we'll have a celebration tomorrow. Maybe by the time they wake up, Moshe will be back, and devastation, catastrophe will be avoided. But they get up early in the morning, and they bring sacrifices, all types of sacrifices, elevation sacrifices, and peace offerings. And they sit down to eat and drink, and they get up, and they become frivolous. And Moshe still in heaven. God tells him we have a disaster unfolding. Your nation, you have to go down because your nation became corrupted. These are your people. You decided to bring this mixed multitude out of Egypt, and they're the real perpetrators of this terrible crime. They have deviated very quickly from the way that they were instructed. They made this golden calf, and they bowed down to it, and they offered sacrifices to it, and they said, this is your God, O Israel, who took you out of the land of Egypt. So we shift very abruptly and very surprisingly from this incredible utopian state the nation has been ever since the Exodus. We've had just a string of wins since the Exodus. Eating manna, drinking water from a rock, the war against Amalek, of course, the Sinai revelation, all these laws. And in an instant, the nation's doing idolatry. And the whole rest of the Parsha is the aftermath and the consequences of it. God says, I'm not interested in this nation. I'm done. Let's destroy them all, and we'll start from scratch. Moshe, you'll be the father, the only father of the nation that will endure. And there's all sorts of moving parts to this catastrophe. They had calculated, Rashi tells us, Moshe was supposed to come 40 days later. Well, it's been 40 days. He's not here. And they didn't know. Moshe said 40 days, full days. A half day doesn't count. So they were a few hours off. And they thought that Moshe was supposed to be back already. And the Satan tricked them. He made it dark and confusing. And he showed them a picture projected on the sky of Moshe being transported in a coffin. And the nation freaks out. We need a replacement. And the Talmud tells us that Hur, Moshe's nephew, he was appointed together with Aaron to manage the nation, to oversee the nation in Moshe's absence. And he tried to reason with the mob and try to stop him, and they kill him. And Aaron says, if they kill me, they're really doomed. I have to play ball. So he tried to delay. It didn't work. And then Rashi tells us that the mixed multitude, they were members of the Egyptian sorcery class, Egyptian sorcerers that were part of the nation, had joined the nation in the Exodus. And then Aaron takes all the gold and puts it in a big fire, and they slip in a little disc, a little magical sorceress disc that's able to take all the gold that's simmering inside the cauldron and make it into a golden calf. And it was an animated golden calf. It was running around like a little puppy. And some people even worshipped it. This is a terrible, awful, egregious, unforgivable maybe, unconscionable sin. And if you think about it, the nation is 40 days after the Sinai revelation. They make a golden calf. They worship on some level a golden calf. The people were anxious. Moshe was supposed to be back. And he's not there. And they start pressuring Aaron, make us a golden calf, and Aaron tries to delay, tries to push it off, tries to forestall. But the golden calf is there. And Aaron, maybe he's culpable on some level. He condoned it. Or at least he tolerated it. And Moshe comes back with the 2 tablets, and he meets Joshua at the bottom of the mountain. And there are noises in the camp, and they discuss the nature of those noises. Moshe arrives at the camp, and he sees the revelry and the celebration and the ecstasy of the golden calf. And he shatters the tablets, and he grinds the golden calf into a powdery dust. And he puts the powder in the water and makes the nation drink like a sota, like a suspected adulteress. And some of the perpetrators who drank died. And then Moshe said, who is loyal to God? Come join me. And the Levites joined. And they slay some more perpetrators. And a third group of perpetrators die in a plague. But the nation is not completely forgiven. And in fact, the end result of all of Moshe's prayers and intercessions and 13 attributes of mercy and so on, the end result is the nation will not be destroyed, but that terrible sin is hanging over us ever since. Every generation, every misfortune that befalls the people a little sliver of the atonement of the golden calf is expiated. Now, we have to understand the severity of this sin before we understand what was going on. What were they thinking? Where did they go wrong? We have studied this already on a simple level. We're going to go much deeper. But we have to understand, this is a very severe sin. It's a sin, our sages tell us, that is akin to the sin of Adam in the garden. Adam, before his sin, had no evil existing within him. The evil in his orbit was external. That's the serpent. And he was told, don't eat from the tree of knowledge, tov v'ra, good and evil. This is a tree that gives you knowledge, but it also gives you good and evil. It mixes those two. Adam, of course, imbibes from the tree. And now good and evil are operating within him. The Talmud frames this by saying, the venom of the serpent was imbibed, was absorbed. It's now coursing within him. All of humanity and really all of created existence shifted. We have to find a different plan. Plan B. Adam's booted. Adam has to get Torah, because without Torah, there's no way to undo this. And the whole process of humanity ever since is to try to restore the pristine state that the collective Adam had before the sin. When the nation experienced the Exodus and the 49 days of preparation for Sinai, and the 50th day at Sinai, Pascha zu hamasam, that venom that was within them, that influence of the sin of Adam that was within them, ceased. They were restored to the way Adam and Eve were before the sin. That holiness, that unbridled vision, that pristine righteousness without a scintilla, a hint of evil within, that was restored. When they were shown the coffin, if you read Rashi very carefully, it was not the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, that showed them the coffin of Moshe. It was the Satan. The Satan, that's a force that's external. The evil inclination is internal. That's what happened with Adam's sin. But this is the nation at this time, they had restored the way it was before the sin. So there is no Yetzer Hara. So the only force of evil is external, the Satan. The evil inclination was not playing a role at that time. It was not a factor. But of course, the nation did the sin, and they reenacted Adam's sin. At Sinai, the nation, when they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen, they received 2 crowns. Why? They spoke like angels. They got crowns like angels. They were like Adam and Eve before their sin. They do the sin, they lose the pristine perfection that they had attained, and of course the crowns to show that they had received that perfection. After the Sinai revelation, there was not supposed to be a tabernacle. A tabernacle is one place. It's one point in the world where God was accessible. God was accessible in the tabernacle more than he was outside of the tabernacle. After Sinai, before the golden calf, the way things were intended to be is that wherever someone were called the name of God, he would come and he would answer you. The tabernacle itself is only a response to the sin of the golden calf. The nation sinned. They committed the grievous sin of the golden calf. And they lost their crowns, and the venom returned. And now they have to have a tabernacle. where they can have this most close and direct relationship with God. And the tabernacle itself is an atonement for the sin of the golden calf. Golden calf was a fundraising effort. Give me your gold. How does the tabernacle start? Collect gold. It's a rectification. Now, it's also noteworthy. The reason why the nation did the sin of the golden calf is because they miscalculated. Moshe said, I'll be back in 40 days. And 40 days later, he's not there. But it was 40 incomplete days. And Aaron knew this, so he tries to delay, to stall. What would have happened if the nation waited a full 40th day? And Aaron returned. All the danger would have been averted. They wouldn't have lost their crowns. They wouldn't have needed a tabernacle. All the terrible consequences of the golden calf would have been avoided. And the venom would not have been restored. So the sin of the golden calf was they delayed but not long enough. That also resembles, by the way, the sin of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, they sinned on Friday, the same day that they were created. In fact, the Talmud goes through an hour-by-hour list of what they did. On hour 1 of the day, the dust that would make up the bodies of Adam and Eve were amassed together, or were collected. And then they were made into like an undefined mass. They were lumped together, but without it being differentiated. And then the 3rd hour, they were stretched out as limbs. And the 4th hour, then a soul was thrown into it. And in the 5th hour, Adam stood on his feet. And on the 6th hour, Adam gave names to all the animals. And on the 7th hour, he got Eve. And on the 8th hour, they ascended to the bed as 2 and descended as 4. On the 9th hour, he was commanded to not eat from the tree. On the 10th hour, he ate. On the 11th hour, he was judged. On the 12th hour, he was punished. It's a pretty eventful day by any standards. The Kabbalists tell us what would have happened had Adam and Eve waited and arrived into Shabbos free of sin. In that counterfactual world, that they don't sin, they delay. Had they waited, they would have cemented their righteousness, and they could have even eaten from the tree of knowledge, good and evil, without suffering any damage. So I find it fascinating that these two sins that structurally achieve the same thing, the imbibing of venom, the mixing or the remixing of good and evil, the diminishment of humanity, they mirror each other in that if you just delayed it, you just waited a little bit, you could have avoided it. So this is a terrible sin, a sin that matches, that mirrors the sin of Adam and Eve. And it's baffling. What was the nation thinking? They're freshly off the Sinai revelation, the Exodus. They're eating manna, drinking water from a rock. How could they do such a terrible, egregious, unconscionable sin? If we read it simply, it's like, oh, well, they just did it because they were foolish. It can't be. There's something very deep that happened over here. Now, to make the subject a bit more interesting, who exactly is responsible? There's a lot of parties that are blamed for what happened. So, of course, primary responsibility, culpability would go to the nation, or at least the new arrivals, the mixed multitude, those Egyptian sorcerers who put the plate of metal into the cauldron to conjure the calf. Or maybe Aaron. Aaron, after all, he made it, or he played ball with them. And of course, he had a good excuse why he wanted to do it, and he tried to stop it. But Aaron has some culpability, you would imagine. When God addresses Moshe, he says, Shiches Amcha, your nation, became corrupted. God blames Moshe because Moshe insisted on taking the mixed multitude to absorb them into the nation. If he just left them in Egypt, you wouldn't have had these instigators. Who does Moshe blame? So if you read all the commentaries in Rashi, Moshe blames God. In verse 31 of chapter 32, this is when Moshe is praying and interceding, trying to stop the decree. Moshe tells God, this nation sinned a terrible sin, and they made a golden god. So Rashi says, quoting from the Talmud, they made a golden god. It's your fault. Moshe tells God, it's your fault. You caused them to do this terrible sin because you gave them all the gold. And what choice did they possibly have? After all, they had so much gold. It's your fault. And then Rashi adds, it's analogous to a king who had a son, and he gave him to eat, and he gave him to drink, and he made him really handsome, gave him lots of jewelry, and put a big money pouch on his neck, and made him stand right next to a brothel. So the kid's on top of the world, all the money, no problems, a spoiled brat we would call him. Is it possible for this kid to not sin? There's no way. The kid will definitely sin. Where did the nation get all the gold from? In Egypt, God, you insisted that they take and borrow, so to speak, gold from their Egyptian neighbors. And then by the sea, you go to the Egyptians to chase them, and they decked out their chariots with gold. And that's how the nation gets so much gold. How could you possibly expect any other outcome? God Almighty, says Moshe, it's your fault. It's hard for us to imagine the logic of Moshe. Moshe's telling God, it's your fault. Why is it God's fault? Can't you have a lot of gold and not do a golden calf? What's Moshe saying? Oh, they had so much gold. What are they going to use on? I don't know. Make a big golden menorah. Make a golden bathtub. Why is Moshe saying, well, if you have so much gold, what could you possibly expect? I expect someone who has a lot of gold to not make a golden calf. Yes, I expect that. What's the logic of what Moshe is saying? What could a kid possibly do to not sin? They have so much gold. What could they possibly do to not sin? How about not making a golden calf? So we have to understand the subject much more deeply. The nation made a golden calf. Not a silver fox. Not a copper cobra. A golden baby cow. Why? What possessed them to say this is the right thing to do? Moshe's missing, and we need Moshe. Let us make a replacement, and it'll be gold, and it'll be a baby cow. What's the logic in that? So there's a very incredible midrash. The nation, a few weeks prior, the nation was at the foot of the mountain, Mount Sinai. And they witnessed things that no other nation ever witnessed. They experienced prophecy on a level that no other nation experienced. And even individually, even the great prophets. Most of the great prophets, the prophecies did not match the prophecy of the ordinary citizens at Sinai. The Midrash says, if you look at the beginning of the book of Ezekiel, chapter 1, and you read what Ezekiel saw. First of all, you won't understand a word that you're reading because it's obviously very Kabbalistic. In fact, the actual canonical example, the textbook definition of a great secret that is arcane and not understandable to the masses is Maaseh Merkava, the chariot that Ezekiel saw. And you can read it and you can translate the words, but it's completely baffling. But it does describe, in terms maybe we could understand but not fully comprehend, 4 figures. A figure of a human, and a lion, and an eagle, and a bull. Now, we have no idea what this actually refers to, but the best words that Ezekiel found to describe his vision are these. The vision that the nation experienced at Sinai was similar to what Ezekiel is describing in chapter 1 of his book. When the nation realized that Moshe, the person who brought them to Sinai, who effectuated them, who went up the mountain, and who's gone, who's disappeared, when he disappeared, they thought we need a replacement. What can we possibly replace him with? What's something that resembles that level that Moshe brought us to? What's a level of greatness that's typified, that's personified, that's embodied by Moshe, that we can kind of couch in some sort of thing? Let's recreate some aspect, some element of what we saw at Sinai. Some aspect that Ezekiel writes about in his book. At Sinai, they had an Ezekiel-like revelation, and they saw something which the best word that we have to describe it is a bull, is a cow, is a bovine, is a calf. They wanted to make a golden calf because that would be the replacement for Moshe, or that would at least be the best physical representation of what they lost and what they wanted to maintain. Of course, the nation was not trying to replace God. And they were certainly not saying that this bull or this calf is going to be a replacement of God or of Moshe even. And that's why they didn't want a full-fledged bull. They wanted just a little baby one. But that is the thinking that went in to the choosing of the thing, the artifact that would restore the state of Sinai and that would supplant Moshe or replace Moshe adequately for them. Now again, just as an aside, this is a very deep and different perspective on what the people were doing. It was like, oh, we want idols. No, they wanted to replace Moshe. And how would they do that? With something that they saw at Sinai. They looked at the cow, the bovine, and they said, I saw you at Sinai. So where was their mistake? Where's the flaw in their plan? We want to replace Moshe. Let's make a golden calf. What's wrong with that? So here's what I want to suggest. I want to suggest that there are 2 ways to achieve greatness. There's the Menorah way, and there's the Torah way. Incense. If you have a menorah, there's no indication, no remnant, no vestige of where that oil came from. The oil was mixed with all these settlements, but it was filtered and filtered and filtered and filtered and filtered. And when you light it, it's pristine. There's no messiness involved in the oil. There's no sediments. There's no remnant. It's just pure. It's just good. By contrast, you have the Torah. It's also lit. And it's lit not far from the Menorah. The Menorah and the and the inner golden altar are right next to each other, inside the Kodesh, inside the sanctuary. And you light the oil, you light the incense, but it's very different. The Torah, the incense, it's a whole jumble of ingredients. And some of them are good and some of them are wonderful and some of them are awful. And those awful things, you don't remove them. It's mixed in all together. And the result of that, when you do it properly, when it's all precisely balanced and measured and weighed, and the good and the bad are just at the perfect ratio, all those 11 ingredients with perfection, then it's beautiful. The Torah and the Menorah are both beautiful. But why? One of them is because you got rid of all the bad. And by the time you bring it there, it's just good. The Torah is the opposite. It's mixed in together with such perfection and skill. The bad is still there, but it's contributing, so to speak, and it's part of the story of the finished product in a way that the net result of it all is wonderful. Both the Menorah and the light of the Menorah and the Torah that was lit on the inner golden altar, they're both beautiful, but they took very different pathways to achieve that. The nation, they wanted Moshe. How do you get Moshe? They wanted something that was very noble. They wanted a replacement of Moshe. They wanted to recapture the experience of Sinai and to have a permanent representation of that. They wanted a golden calf. How do you get such a thing? They wanted it without really putting in the work. They wanted it the same way they got everything till now. The Exodus. It's a nation of slaves, idolaters. They got it. All those miracles, all those plagues, they got it. The Exodus night, they were still idolaters, and they got it. At the split of the sea, the angels looked at both camps and said, these are idolaters, these are idolaters. Why are we saving one? Why are you saving one God and killing the other? Why are you taking the water and making it into walkable paths? They got it. Why do they deserve to eat manna and drink water from a rock? They got it all for free. There's no process of going through the difficulty of making a person with all the warts and all, with all the sediments and all, with all the good things and bad things together, working really hard until it's perfect. It was just pristine. They wanted to look, I got that in heaven. There was a cow in heaven. Let's make a cow here. They wanted Moshe. They wanted the greatness of Moshe. But they didn't put in the 80 years of non-stop sweat. Let's put it in a little cauldron, mix it up together. Let's get it. I wanted to snatch it from heaven. And Moshe tells God, this is your fault. You gave them gold. It's your fault. This does not mean that the physical, this is what my interpretation is. It's not just the physical gold that the nation had. All the levels of greatness that the nation has achieved until this point, they got for free. The Almighty gave them the gold. God Almighty, you train them. The greatness is something you just get. You condition them to think that you just do something and you have the representation of Ezekiel's chariot. You've told them, you've conditioned them. All you need to do is just make a calf and you have Moshe. But the truth is, how did Moshe become Moshe? What does the verse say about Moshe? Ha-ish Moshe. Moshe the man. Moshe was a man of God, but he was a man. He wasn't an angel. Moshe is the only person called Ish Elokim, man God, man of God. What does that mean? From beginning to end, Moshe was a man with all the sediments that come with being human. He was physical. And yet, he became an angel. And yet, he's called Ish Elokim, a man of God. What's the first reference to Moshe in the Torah? So, if we would search all of Genesis, we would not find the word Moshe even once. But the Talmud says, well, where does it say Moshe in the Torah? It says, well, the name Moshe appears more than any other name, but that's not what the Talmud says. The Talmud says the name Moshe is found at the end of Parshas Bereshis, when the nation, when humanity had become corrupted, and God says, I have a 120 year leash for this enterprise. Bishegam hu basar, because he is flesh. The word bishegam, meaning for because, or as insofar because. That is the gematria Moshe. And humanity has been given a 120 year grace period. Well, how long did Moshe live? Exactly 120 years. But isn't it interesting that the first time that the Talmud finds a representation of Moshe in the Torah is when it describes humanity as being fleshy. Bishramu basar, he's flesh. What pathway did Moshe use to get up to the mountain? He used the path of Ish Elokim, a man of God. Through his humanity, he took a path to heaven. When Moshe got up to heaven, he met the angels. And the angels said, well, he shouldn't be here. Not because he's not worthy of being here, but because of his pedigree. What is a earthling doing amongst us? Ma liyalud isha beinin. Why is there someone born to a woman amongst us? It's incongruent to have someone born to a human, born to a woman, amongst angels. Now, yes, he can match us tit for tat. But how does someone who comes from that background, that pedigree, and all that comes with that, all the animalistic tendencies that come with being human, how does he end up over here? But Moshe did end up over there. Moshe took his humanity and found the way to transform himself into an angel, appear with those things that he met up there. And all the while, he was a Ish Moshe, and he was Ish Elokim, a man of God, but a man. When God threatened to destroy the whole nation, he said, Moshe, I'll make you a father of the next nation. And Moshe responded, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Rashi explains, if you have a stool with 3 legs, and it topples over, all the more so, a stool with only 1 leg. Now, what I want to suggest is, we know that angels have only 1 leg. The reason why we stand with our feet together during Kedusha is to mimic angels. Angels don't walk, they have only 1 leg. Moshe was saying, do you want to start a nation of just Moshes? Just angels? That's not what I want. It's simpler to have a nation of just angels with 1 leg. No messy humans with all these problems, all these sediments that they bring to the table with them. Moshe says, no, that's not what I want. The nation wanted the right thing. The goal that they had was noble. They wanted to recreate Moshe. They wanted to recreate something that could go up to heaven, that could be an angel. They wanted the bovine represented in the prophecy, in the vision of Ezekiel. The goal was fine. The means was the problem. And Moshe says to God, on some level, it's your fault because you have been giving them greatness and greatness and greatness unearned. But the truth is, the way to make a Moshe is like how you make the Ketores, the good and the bad, the things that on their own are fantastic, and the things that on their own are awful, and you mix them together the exact right ratio, you find the perfect balance. And then what emerges is even greater than the angels. That's what Moshe achieved. And the Torah tells us, you have to light the menorah. And the menorah is clean of any sediments. But every time you light the menorah, I want you to also do something. Every time we deal with menorah, you must not forget about the Ketores. You want to have an experience that's refined, that's free of any sediments, free of any physicality, something so elevated. Don't do anything with the menorah unless you're doing also something with the Ketores. Match it with something that represents the system of how Moshe became Moshe. There's danger to engage with menorah on its own, because that could lead to people thinking, oh, we need sediments. We want to deal with sediments. We'll go straight to the end. I don't have to reckon with all the things, the good and bad, the mixture, the complications of being a human. I'll just be refined and cleanse, and we'll just go straight. That's what the nation wanted. But that's not how we grow. When you prepare the menorah, you're engaging in the menorah right away. Offer some Ketores. When you light the menorah, you offer Ketores, because this is how we grow. We're humans. It's messy. Lots of sediments. Lots of parts that are undesirable. Lots of parts that we wish we didn't have. But we can become great. But let's not make the mistake of the people that made the golden calf. They wanted a very noble goal, but the means that they used were means that were bound for failure. The true way to do it is Ha'ish Moshe. Moshe is a man. Moshe is a Ish Elokim, is a man of God, but he's a man through and through. He's flesh and blood through and through. There's good things and bad things wrapped together, but wrapped in such a way, mixed in such a way, that actually he's higher than the angels. We may be inclined to go the path of the menorah. No sediments anywhere. It's a breeze. But unless you're an angel, it's not going to work. It's going to fall on its face. There is a path up the mountain. That path was blazed by Moshe, and he showed us how to do it. Moshe, Zeha Ish Moshe. Moshe is a man. Ish Elokim, yes, but a man. And the way he did it is like the Ketores. And don't neglect the Ketores. When you light, when you prepare, the menorah must always be matched and paired with the Ketores. Let's get to this week's dilemma. A dilemma. A fun one. Maybe a little cheeky. Forgive me. Suppose your dilemma was, how do I impress upon someone the importance of giving charity? It's one of the subjects that I don't talk about as much as I should. Talmud says that there's one mitzvah that's equal to all the mitzvahs combined. And that's charity. Tzedakah tatzil mimavis. Tzedakah, charity, saves a person from dying. I don't want to talk about it because everyone will say, oh, the rabbi's running a fundraiser, so suddenly he cares about that. Oh, Torch needs some donations. And that's true. But this week's Parsha talks about donations. And it happens to be a fundraiser. I think it's maybe it's a little cheeky, but it's important to hear what we could tell someone who wants to know. The Parsha begins with a fundraising drive. Everyone must give. Well, how much? Half a shekel. Why half? Why not a full shekel? I'm sure the temple coffers could figure out what to do with the leftover money, if there's any. Why half a shekel? Why half? Machatzis hashekel. Half a shekel. Why? In Judaism, we always do something the full distance, right? The full measure. Suddenly it's a half a shekel. When it comes to charity, it's a half a shekel. Why? So there's many answers to this question, but I'll tell you one answer from the Gaon of Vilna. The word machatzis, which means half, doesn't say chatzi shekel, which is maybe a faster way to say it. It's machatzis, which it's the same root, chatzi, which means half, but it's machatzis. Spelled mem, ches, tzadik, yud, saf, or taf. If you look at that word, it has the word a living one and a dead one in it. Chai means living. Mes or met means dead or dying. If you look at this word, says the Gaon of Vilna, machatzis, in the middle is the letter tzadik. Tzadik, the Talmud tells us, means tzedakah, charity. And the two letters on either side of the middle letter, so the second and the second to last, it's a ches and a yud, which means chai, life. And the letters that are on the extremes, the first and last letter, are mem and saf, which means dead. Says the Gaon of Vilna, the Torah is telling us, machatzis hashekel. When I'm asked you to give charity, why? Give tzedakah, because that brings life towards you, and that brings death away from you. Now, the truth is, of course, it's a verse. Tzedakah tatzil mimavis. Tzedakah saves a person from death. Those who uphold the Torah, it's a eitz chaim, it's a tree of life. Ba'orach tzedakah chaim, the verse tells us in Proverbs chapter 12. This is not me. Look at the sources. The sources equate charity with life. If someone's saying, well, if someone has a cynical interpretation of what I'm saying, that's fine. That's fine. But it's a lesson that the Torah is telling us. Give charity so that way you have life. May we all be so fortunate as to be givers of charity, not recipients of charity. And may we all be so fortunate as to receive life. And if you don't want to give to Torch, which in my opinion is the best charity, certainly in Texas. I don't have a question about that, but I think it's west of the Mississippi. I'm pretty sure, because the impact that we have, and the amount of Torah that we teach, and the amount of Hashem's word that we spread in the world, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, it's hard for me. Maybe you know of some other organization, so I could give charity to it that does a comparable job. But I really think it's the best charity west of the Mississippi. And we're doing a fundraiser. If you want to support us, givetorch.org. We appreciate that. We appreciate all your friendship. And we appreciate the amazing generosity that y'all have shown us hitherto, not just this year, in previous years. Everyone who gives towards our campaigns is a partner in what we do. And all the Torah that we teach, you have a share of the action. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that. I like to repeat that again because it's true. I always say people are going to get to heaven and be like, where are all these mitzvos coming from? I didn't do any of these mitzvos. No. You supported a cause, a charity that engendered those mitzvos, and you get a slice of the action. And that's certainly true with Torch. If you want to partner with us, you want to support us, givetorch.org. Every donation is doubled. It's the end. We start off the podcast recording 64% of the way towards our goal. We hope to get there. Please God, I thank you all for your listenership and your attention. Have a wonderful day. Have a fantastic Purim. Have an unbelievable, uplifting Shabbos. Sober, hopefully, upcoming. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, we'll talk again next week. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.